Welcome to the details of those stories now. Swiftly assent to the right to information law as promised a few years ago. That's a charge coming from the Coalition on the Right to Information Ghana, the Media Coalition on RTI and Occupy Ghana, in a joint statement congratulating Parliament for passing the Right to Information Bill after 20 or almost 20 years. Well, this bill has been described as one of the best laws in the world, and the second Deputy Speaker, Alban Bagwin, alluded to this. But should you and I be excited about this? Well, in a moment, I will be sharing some facts on the RTI because more than 100 countries around the world have implemented some form of freedom of information legislation. But due to an entrenched culture of state secrecy and government bureaucracy, the implementation of the right to information law in many of these countries has been fraught with fairly stiff challenges. For many organizations, citizens' right to information is not an institutional priority. What should we expect as Ghanaians? I'll be engaging some members of the RTI coalition shortly. But first, let's hear from Second Deputy Speaker, Alban Bagwin, who has seen this bill through its inception, that's from 1999 up until now.
Definitely, the writing will have to be done, the processes will have to be followed, it has to go through the speaker has to go through it and make sure that all the decisions of the House have been properly captured in the bill before it's assented to by His Excellency the President. And so I thank all members for the patience, for the tolerance, but definitely we cannot boast, we cannot be proud that we pass this bill, because at least this is a record time, taking such a long time to finally get the law. But it is a very key bill. It's not like the other bills that have come through the House. This is a fundamental law that is going to change the whole nature of governance in this country. But I thank members for the patience, for the endurance, and for the time you've taken throughout the day. Thank you so much.
That's the second Deputy Speaker there. Well, we can now hear from the Information Minister, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, who spoke with journalists shortly after the passage of the bill.
For all of us, from about 2007, when the initial draft was done during the tenure of the fourth Parliament. The fifth and sixth Parliament have had opportunity to handle the bill, but finally, on the tenure of the seventh Parliament, it's been passed. The next steps are to get presidential assent to the bill, and then also to very quickly move towards implementation, particularly of the behind-the-scenes infrastructure, so that by the time we start the next financial year, as the current law says, we'll be ready to see it fully. So I think that's the good news that we have all witnessed here today. If you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to take them.
When will the President give his assent to the bill?
Like the Speaker mentioned, the Parliament will have to tidy up the final draft of the bill and then transmit it to the Office of the President. And the President has mentioned that he would proceed to sign it off immediately he receives it.
How is government taking the minority leader request that make sure funds are provided to this?
I don't understand.
Minority leader.
Yeah.
During some estimate that the government should ensure that the next budget, this office should be adequate.
No, I mean, we are all interested in that same matter. That is why the background exercises have to start, hopefully before the mid-year review, so that we can ensure that, for example, recruitment, training, the kind of back-end infrastructure is put in place. And then at the start of the next financial year, which means it should be in the next budget, we'll be able to ensure that we have the necessary resources to give full effect to the law as it stands now. So I think all of us are in agreement.
Earlier, CSOs disagreed with portions of the bill, and indeed the minority leader wanted to champion that particular cause. But we didn't see the light of it.
For legislation, you would have people having various views. We are of the view that the bill in its current form is sufficient to meet the tenets of Article 21(1)(f). And indeed, if there's anything else that can be done, even the Constitution itself as a point is amended. So if there's anything that needs to be done, our view was that let's pass it now. If in the future we need to make any amendments, we're happy so to do.
Some regulations may have to come with a bill that has been passed. Is there room for further consultation with CSOs on the regulations?
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, in the bill itself, we engaged extensively with CSOs, the Media Coalition, etc. And, of course, in the preparation of the regulations, we will do same as well.
Is the regulations coming anytime soon?
One of the first things we are going to do is a workshop to tidy up the roadmap for implementation before the mid-year review. We need to do that so that in the mid-year budget review and in the second half of the year, we do all the background work, which would ensure that in 2020 we'll be ready to go towards full implementation.
We have up to a year, as you mentioned, to implement this bill that has just been passed. Once the president essentially becomes an act of parliament, how soon should we expect you to roll out other measures? For instance, there's a talk about appointment of a commission. There's talk about appointment of information officers across the board. How soon should we expect this to kickstart?
As I mentioned, we are working between now and half year, that is June, to tidy up the roadmap for implementation and get the necessary cabinet approval for the roadmap for implementation. And then we'll use the second half of the year to do all of this background work so that by the start of the next financial year, as the bill says, we're ready to implement. That's our target.
Yeah, funding. Are we assured that in the next budget we'll have adequate resources towards the implementation?
The government is committed to put the portions of the national resource envelope that is available to facilitate this law at the disposal of the agencies that are responsible for implementing this law. Admittedly, yes, it requires a lot of significant resources, and I'm sure when it gets to budget 2020, we would explore how to ensure that the funding is not a one-off funding, the funding is regular, so that we can all get the benefits out of this law that we have passed.
Finally, you were live on GH1 TV. I'm sure you might have touched on this already. How do you feel today, you as Sector Minister?
I think for all of us who are here as journalists especially, and I consider myself a journalist still, it's a moment of joy for us. We have all advocated for this bill for many years. I in particular am humbled by the fact that as one of you, I get to be the one to move the motion on the floor.
That's the Information Minister Kojo Oppong Nkrumah there yesterday in Parliament after the bill was approved. Well, a way around the issue of probable non-compliance with the law is to establish, empower and equip an agency that will oversee compliance with the law. We'll cross over to Kenya to speak with a journalist and we'll find out how the RTI works over there. We'll also engage a lawyer practicing in the United Kingdom. But now let me give you some information on the RTI. I mean, yesterday you saw how it all went, but the devil is always in the details. So just so you know from our fact sheet here, now more than 100 countries around the world have implemented some form of freedom of information legislation. Sweden's Freedom of the Press Act of 1766 happens to be the very oldest. Now in Ghana, since 1999, we've been making efforts to have this, to have the Parliament approve or pass the information, the Right to Information law. Of course, you know how it ended yesterday. Well, that bill requires the setting up of an institution to manage public information. And as you're well aware of, there has been a bit of an amount attached to the implementation of this. Earlier we heard what government said about how much it will cost us should we need to implement or should we need to establish the commission that will help with the implementation of this particular law. Now a manual is also to be published. That manual spells out the types of information that may be accessed at various public institutions. Now, as you're well aware of, there's certainly not every information will be given out. If it satisfies the requirement of national security information, then obviously, or information that borders on national security obviously won't be sent out there. Now, information is exempt from disclosure, as I was saying, if it is prepared for submission or has been submitted to the office of the president as well. And we do know about the national security bit as well, but the law makes it quite clear as to what kind of information can be given and what kind of information cannot be given. It also makes it clear how long it should take for that information to be given. Now, there are other types of information that are exempted from disclosure, and that include information that could prejudice national security, as I was saying, information that's affecting international relations, among others. Of course, there's a lot of diplomatic connections, a lot of diplomatic relations that Ghana has with other countries. And so if that information borders on the diplomatic or the international relations, then it is exempted according to this law. Now, a decision by an information officer denying an applicant could be challenged with the head of the public institution and subsequently at the High Court. What this means basically is that if you have a request or you send a request to a particular office for any particular information and you are denied, you can go ahead and challenge that decision with the head of the public institution. As in, if you're getting information, you're seeking information from a state agency and they're not giving it to you, what you can do is to consult with the head of that institution if you're denied. And if you're still unhappy, you can take it up with the institution that is supposed to implement the right to information law. And of course, we've been told, government has told us how much it will cost it to put that commission or to put that entity together. We heard from the information minister that that is going to happen in the next financial year. We're looking at 2020 here for that matter. Well, let's get on the phone lines now and get some more information. What we can do, let's have a discussion. I'm going to speak with Joe Gans Latte. He's a barrister, legal consultant, and a retired borough crown prosecutor. He joins me on the line. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Well, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Very well. I'm sure that you've been following what's happened here in Ghana.
In relation to the freedom of information.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I've been following it since the idea was mooted some years ago. I'm pleased to know we've reached this stage.
Let's find out how we've just established that there are various various legislation, that govern information, sharing of information in several countries. And of course, we learn a lot from the United Kingdom. In fact, most of our laws are based on the common law. So how does it work in the UK?
I haven't seen the text of the current act that's been set in Ghana as such, so I'm a bit limited. But based on what we have here in the UK, basically gives the public access, statutory access to information that for whatever reason they require. But as you can imagine, and I think you've alluded to that, not every information is available to the public to access. So you then have we have a situation here where certain clear categories can be accessed. They have certain exemptions. Some are qualified exemptions, some are not. And what it means is that when a member of the public or a company or for whatever reason needs information, they have to make sure, first of all, that that information is not exempted, like you mentioned, security matters and so forth. But with the qualified exemption, I think the main criteria from my point of view is what the public interest demands. So in the UK, if first of all you want an information and that information is not exempted, the next question is whoever has the information will have to make a judgment whether it's in the public interest to disclose it or not. Are you with me so far?
I am with you.
Yeah, okay. Now, it means somebody has got to make that judgment. Okay. Also, the important thing is that information actually available? Because, if you don't have a competent, efficient recording system for information, somebody may be entitled to some information, but the records doesn't actually help them to find it. So it's not just a question of accessing it, it's a question of knowing that it exists. And then secondly, whoever holds the information makes a judgment that is in the public interest to release them.
Right. Well,
that's the way it seems to be working here. There have been
UK.
occasions when the courts have been asked to make a decision as to whether the information should be made available or not.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, when it comes to these matters, the outcome is always dependent on what a particular court determines.
Right. Hang on for me. Hang on for me, Barrister. I'm going to come back to you and find out from you whether there has been times where this process has been tested in the UK. If you can direct us to any of those and how it worked then. But hang on for me as you brood over that particular question. I've also been joined on the line by lawyer Samson Ladi Ayen, and he's a private legal practitioner and also a journalist. In fact, he is one of the people, part of the coalition which has been piling a lot of pressure on government to pass this law. Samson, thank you very much for your time this afternoon here on The Pulse.
Hi, Gifty.
All right. So one of the conversations that have come up quite clearly in this has to do with the categories as far as which kind of information is exempted. Now, what are your observations? And I'm sure you've looked at, I mean, you know this bill very well. What are your observations as far as the categorizations in terms of exemptions vis-a-vis public interest is concerned? What are your observations in that regard?
Right. I think that whatever we talk about, we should pay attention to Section 17. And Section 17 very clearly and emphatically pronounces that when the disclosure is in the public interest, there cannot be any other overriding reason. For as long as there is a case to make, the overriding public interest will essentially overtake any excuses and justifications that anybody might want to give. So that is the most critical test for any information that has to be accessed.
Okay.
It is the reason I take a bit of consolation, even though we had pushed at the very final stages for a couple of considerations to amend some other clauses, particularly Section 13. We're seeking an amendment of that aspect, Section 13, but that has not happened. And I still want to revert to take some consolation in Section 17, which has an overriding mandatory, position that if it is not adhered to, unfortunately, one has to, if one exhausts the internal review, exhausts the commission process, and still is not satisfied, then we'll have to escalate the matter to a court of law. Section 13, which we're seeking for a further amendment, essentially is to the effect that information is exempt if the disclosure of that information will reveal advice, opinion, recommendation, consultation, or deliberation that is likely to undermine the deliberative process in that public institution. Now, what that effectively means is that once the information you are seeking is information to an ongoing process, or the information you are seeking, it will reveal an advice about an ongoing process, an advice, an opinion, or recommendation, then it is likely to be exempt.
So what it basically means, and help me if I'm wrong, what it basically means is that any organization could easily say that, well, we cannot give you this information because there is an ongoing process regarding this.
Exactly. So the question one has to ask is, what is the wisdom, particularly if we are not pessimistic about potential information seekers, and if we are positive about their input in the governance process, in the open governance that we are all moving to, and in the transparency in governance that, even the framers of our constitution as far back as 1992 and by the time we promulgated in 1998, put in Article 21 of the Constitution to say we needed this law. Now, the point is that if you have finished the deliberative process, you want to give a contract, for example, and in the process of awarding the contract, I have vital information, but I need to know what exactly you are doing to be able to give you that information so that it will assist. Maybe someone has a better expertise, superior information that will assist in that deliberative process. You say, no, we won't give it to you.
Because
when we have finished and completed the process, then you come for it. When I come for it at that time, what is the use of that information? It's something that has been consummated.
Right.
We want to go after the horse long after it is bolted.
Okay.
After the doors have been shut.
Right.
And this is why we say, the coalition is saying that we are hugely disappointed.
But then there's an area of consolation, as you put it, for you in Section 17, where the public interest overrides others. I'm going to come to you, and Ms. Ayenene, hold on for me briefly. I'm going to come to you, Mr. Ganslate, about how this law, if you like, the process that you just explained to me earlier has been tested in the United Kingdom. Are there any specific references you can help us with?
You mean previous cases?
Yes. Where someone, for example, the controversial cases, of course, where there's had to be discretion vis-a-vis public interest, where there has had to be categorization or exemptions, etc. Whether it has been tried ever in the UK, as far as you're aware.
Yeah. Okay. The only example I can think of is that of a case in which the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, sought to not to disclose the case because he felt it was a hybrid situation where the public interest was in conflict with the interest of the public to know, etc., etc. And I don't know if I'm making myself.
And how did that case end? Did they have to go to court to get the court?
Yes. You see, the best example I can give is that in most cases, the information is held by either a government institution, a private institution, or somebody who has reasons not to want to disclose the information.
Yeah.
So if it's not exempted per se, right from the outset, and you want to prove that the information is being withheld from you illegally or unfairly or whatever word you want to use, then the only way out is to, first of all, I hope, you see, I haven't seen the act. There is something here we call Information Commissioner. That's your first bar. If you feel the information should be given to you, you can approach the
Information Commissioner
who can make a judgment.
Okay.
If that fails, you still can go to court and then ask the court to look at the facts and then make a judgment.
Okay.
So my weakness in this discussion is that I haven't seen
our act here in Ghana, right?
Yeah, and how it compares with the UK, and I'll be quite happy to make myself available in the future when I have had a chance to compare the two, so that I can point out from the British experience some of the flaws or some of the weaknesses or some of the things that would make its implementation a bit more difficult.
Okay.
Most people who have information see it as a source of power, and they're never happy to let it go. So the important thing is for us, if we are going to make it a useful tool for our development, is to make sure that people know how to dig. It's like going through a maze, how to dig and dig without becoming frivolous. Because the law will stop that if they think you are just seeking information for information sake.
Ms. Agas-Lartey, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I'm coming back to you, Samson, but let me also acknowledge that we do have Vincent Ingethe, who is a Deputy Kenya editor, who's joining us via Skype, and I'll be engaging him shortly. Ms. Ingethe, thank you very much for joining the discussion. Ms. Ayenene, I'm coming back to you with the issue of discretion and records keeping. One of the things we've heard is that these institutions will necessarily have to make the information available, but we know the culture, our information, our records keeping culture in this country. Digitization is not something that we are necessarily known to do very well. Isn't it going to be very easy for any state institution to then say that, well, we don't have it on record? That's one. Or there was fire and the fire gutted the company and took away the documentation. Apart from that, there's also the issue about discretion as far as these exemptions are concerned, isn't there?
The discretion must be exercised within the law and not capriciously, not whimsically. That is the guiding post. And I want to say that we as citizens and also as media should also not approach this with a pessimistic, attitude and negative, mindset, because it is not good. We both must act in good faith. So let's not immediately be thinking that someone will want to hide information and someone will want to say, I don't have it, when they have it. The systems that are supposed to be in place, as we are told, which is going to cost us how much, millions of Ghana cedis, should be in place. And then when they are, there should be an excuse.
Okay.
The information must always be preserved and stored. It will be available for anybody to access. The law says if you made your application to one entity and they didn't have information, they could make a transfer because they know where you could get it. So you could get a transfer to another entity which rather has custody of that information. The law is clear that when an application is made, the information officer within 14 days must let you know what is up, and process your application for you. If they have an adverse, position, you can make an internal review to the head of that institution. The internal review may change the position of the officer.
Right.
If the internal review doesn't change, there's one more layer of the commission to approach.
Okay.
And if so, that doesn't work for you, then you go to court. If the information is about someone's safety or is it health and liberty, it ought to be worked on within 48 hours. I think that we should approach this with a positive mindset, and hope that the people who are paid by our taxes, information that is generated by our taxes and stored in processes that our taxes are used to, procure, and put in offices that our taxes are used to build, will not give us any excuses, because it is not godly to do that. It's so wrong.
Right.
So I want to look at it with a positive mind.
Right.
And hope that all the things that have to be done, including the LI that will be required, will all be put in place, and so we can access information in due course.
Okay.
I just said I am not in a celebratory mood like some others are, because I am too familiar with the terrain in Africa and in Ghana, where I am presently in court representing Ghanaians living abroad, to get court to compel the government to implement a law it passed some 13 years ago. Our parliamentarians, they say they represent us and they represent our interests, and yet we have had to push them
before they do what they ought to do.
The 6th parliament failed. It is this 7th parliament that has done it. And I say I am not also exactly congratulating anybody, because I don't see why I am paying you to do a job, and when you do what I pay you to do, I'm supposed to be saluting you and say you have done so well. In any case, the Constitution says, do this thing. Over 20 years, you have cost us a lot of
So let me ask you quickly, before I let you go, Ms. Ayenene.
Yourself, multimedia, myself, the coalition we have been pushing, we are exhausted. I'm just tired.
That's true. That's true. That's very true, which is why some people will be excited. Of course, you are not one of those. But quickly, before I let you go, Samson, when we spoke to the minister, the information minister, he said that this will happen, the implementation will be done in the next financial year. So we're looking at 2020. What are your expectations between now and then?
Yeah, that is what, they have put in the law, that because there's no money to set up things and stuff, and we didn't budget for it. Have you heard of that kind of story before in any law that was passed in this country?
Well, perhaps this requires a lot more, much more than the others.
Oh, my dear sister, this is a big lie. I'll say that again. We don't do this to the citizens, and about a law that is so fundamental to them. The preamble of our Constitution says that government exercises power on our behalf, and it's a mandate we have given them.
So take us through your expectations as we wait for that for the implementation.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Let's use the period to do the right thing.
Okay.
And so that when it is time, we will not come and say it is in the pipeline, it's ongoing. That kind of phraseology. We are tired of it.
After 19 years, we certainly are tired. And I'll say, even though you're not particularly excited, congratulations to the coalition, the media coalition, to all the other stakeholders, to all the other...
to yourself and the multimedia group as well.
Right. We congratulate ourselves. But of course, there's still work to be done. There's still work to be done before this actually takes place and before the citizenry will be able to use it. Well, let me take you to a country where they've passed it and it's working. How are they going about it? What is it that they're doing? I'm going to speak to Vincent Ngethe. He's a deputy editor in Kenya with the Africa Check, a deputy Kenya editor with Africa Check. He joins us via Skype. Mr. Ngethe, thank you very much for your time this afternoon once again, and thanks for your patience in waiting for us. Tell us how it works in Kenya.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Go ahead and tell us how this works in Kenya.
Well, in Kenya, the Access to Information Law was passed in 2016. And it happened a very long process. And the first draft go back to 2002. And this went on because, the law kept, unfortunately, not getting passed. Parliament would get this, or would not get passed. And after the first election by 2007, it was on all the negotiation and documents that brought the peace that this law was important. And so continued, and it was finally passed in 2016. So how does the law work? Well, it's the way it is mainly driven by the citizenship. So the citizens are to file access to information, and a person who has gone through the process, there is still a lot of work to be done to sensitize government the importance of access to information. From the access to information requests we filed, most of them have not accepted information. And as far as like the last year that we've around 3,000 requests have been filed. So for a country of more than 40 million people, this is a very small number.
So you say that since it was passed, there's been about 2,000 requests.
Around 3,000, yeah.
Around 3,000 requests, and you're saying that that's a small number. But do we know the success rate of these requests?
Well, of those are around 2,400. Some information has been disclosed. And then 93 have been declined. Another 93 have been transferred to another department, and around 20.
So clearly, it is a system that you can say is working in Kenya. What are the loopholes you've identified so far? Are there any flaws that we can learn from, since we are about to begin ours?
Well, when you file an access to information request, one of the things that you find out right away is that government officials they're very circumspect about giving you the information. And so what usually happens is you don't get the information until you prove a certain capacity to follow up. That means that in Kenya, access to information, that the entity that you ask for information has 21 days to decide whether to give the information or not.
Okay.
Part of the problem with the Act is that it says that if you don't hear after 21 days, you can assume the request has been rejected. Now, what that means is that you have to actually follow up. They may not get back to you within that period. You actually have to follow up. When you show up at the offices, that is when the wheels begin to turn. So there is a lot of follow-up necessary. You have to show that you're not let this go, and you have to call, email, you have to show up and ask what has happened to my request. If you don't do that, it may not go anywhere.
Okay, well, hang on for me, Mr. Ngete. I'll come back to you for concluding remarks. But I mean, I appreciate that you may not, follow the smooth sound in the Skype there. But what he's basically saying is that he first of all, he gave us information as to how far the law, has come following the 2006 elections and how it had to be put on hold, etc. But he said that since they passed this law, there's been about close to 3,000 requests, and out of that 3,000 requests, about 93 have been declined. But the point that he makes also is that, first of all, when you're seeking this information, and usually you're seeking the information from government agencies, they're obviously not, open and happy to give you the information all the time. But you need to prove your need for that information. He also mentioned that for them, it's 21 days. If you put in a request, you should hear, or you should expect to hear from them in 21 days. The only thing is that they will not reach out to you. You will have to go back to them, because they tell you that if you don't hear from us in 21 days, you should assume that your request has been declined. That is, if it is not declined, you will hear from them before 21 days. What happens is that in 21 days, you will have to make a follow-up to find out if it's been declined, why, and then if you want to follow up, you go. Here in Ghana, from the law that we've just passed, we understand that it is 14 days. Within 14 days, if you request for an information, you should be able to get that information or response from the organization in 14 days. Let me quickly engage Samuel Obeng. He's a member of the RTI Media Coalition as well. Mr. Obeng, thank you this afternoon for your for joining in the conversation. I just spoken to Samson Ladi Ayenene, who is also a part of this the coalition, and what he says is that this is not the time to be excited. It's actually exhaustion he feels at the moment, because it's taken so long to get here. 19 years, that's no joke. I'm not sure what the coalition itself thinks and how it's taken this breakthrough, if you like.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you and your viewers. For us also within the coalition, myself, as Executive Director for Parliamentary Network Africa, and all of my colleagues, I think it's a mixed feeling situation, and we can very much relate to the feeling as has been expressed by Samson. Because you see, you have advocated for this for a very, very long time.
Right.
Eventually it has come, but it came at a time when, everybody was very much exhausted about the process, and then also it didn't come without drama, and it didn't come without Parliament deciding to reject some of the amendments that we pushed through to them, which we thought are very critical to the successful implementation of the law. But I mean, be it as it may, we are excited that we have a law, and we're happy that this current parliament, has done the needful.
Now, what remains though? What remains though is the implementation. And I'm talking to someone from Kenya, where they have a law, the law that's working over there. And the person that I'm speaking to is one of the people who also actually worked for it, pushed for it, a part of the advocates for this work. And since they have the experience, let me find out from him what advice he can give you on the Ghana side. I mean, those of us here who are also advocating for the law, of course, the implementation stages where we're getting into now. Let's see the kind of advice he can give us, what we can learn from the Kenyan experience. Ms. Angete, I'm coming to you. I have on the line another person who has been part of advocates pushing for this law. What kind of advice can you give them? I mean, you're past the stage where we are now. What kind of advice can you give advocates in Ghana at the stage we are, where the law has just been passed and we're looking at implementation? Any advice from your side?
Hi. Yes. First, I would like to clarify that what I have been doing is making sure that the law works.
Okay.
After its implementation.
Right.
But in that experience, what I have found is that if you don't push for your request, even if the law says that you need an answer in 21 days, that answer may not come unless the government entity sees that you are able to follow up. So in addition, I would like to clarify that in the Kenyan law, you don't have to say why you want the information.
Okay.
As long as you request it, they're not supposed to ask you what you're using it for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and also, when you file a request, as long as it is written, it can be in English or Kiswahili, that's good enough. If a person who is illiterate wants to make a request, what he has to do is just tell an officer that he wants to make a request. So that person has to write it down and then give the person who requested it a copy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Mr. We're going to end this conversation, but Mr. Bain, I need to come to you quickly to take your final thoughts on this. Now, the point that he's made is that when you file a request, you don't need to be asked any questions. As far as you file that request, the information should be given you. He's also said that they mentioned inclusion, where people who are not literate, people who cannot write, actually also have the opportunity to just walk to officers there and say, look, I want this information, and the officer has the responsibility. I don't know if you have studied the law as it was passed yesterday, but are these provisions that are made, make that your concluding remarks for me?
Well, I mean, in our law too, you don't have to state the reason why you need the information. You just have to provide your basic background information. I mean, your name, request for the information, the kind of information you are looking for. But you don't have to indicate why you are looking for it.
Right.
And that is a very good similarity with the Kenyan law. Now, again, they have 21 days. We have 14 days. And, of course, I heard him mention that if you don't receive the feedback on your information request within the 21 days, it means that the request has been is deemed to have been denied.
That's what you expected to assume. That's what you expected to assume until you follow up.
Yes, and so his advice is that we need to be doing more follow-up because government agencies are not very willing.
They're not they're not your best friend when it comes to disclosure of information, of course.
Exactly, and so it is something that we'll take in good stride. And as we put in place the implementation mechanisms from the civil society side, from the media advocate side, these are things that I'm sure we would put very much in our communication as we educate the public about the new law.
Mr. Obeng, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and congratulations once again. Finally, Ms. Angethe, your final words for Ghana. We've just seen our law passed. You've been living it. A quick one as your final word.
It's a fantastic day for Ghana. I would like to urge every citizen of Ghana to file a request. This is the way you will test the law and make it work. And also to note that in Kenya, there are at least 4 court cases that have tested access to information. And on these cases, the principle has been upheld. So this is something that is known to work in this country. And, you know, as far as our experience is concerned, we have seen at least in one situation where the government office gave us the information we wanted. So it does work. You will get rejections, but you can also get your information.
Okay.
So everybody should file a request.
Certainly, certainly. We will be filing the request. Mr. Ngethe, thank you so much there. Vincent Ngethe, he's a Deputy Kenya Editor with Africa Check, joining us all the way from Kenya, which has implemented its law already, he's telling us. For them, it's 21 days after you file that request. You should hear, or you should get a response in 21 days. If you don't, it means that it's been rejected, but you can follow up. And he's sharing that information with us. For us, it's 14 days. And we also, you can file information. You don't need to say why you need that information. Just file the request. So he's urging us, all of us, to test the law by filing those requests. So we've been on the street finding out from people what they thought about this. Here's what they say.
For 2 decades, we've been wanting to have a dream, which is the passage of the RTI bill. And then God being so good, finally, we have the RTI bill.
As an upcoming journalist, to me, if this RTI bill is signed by the president, it helps. It's good, at least. For the information that our politicians consider so classified, we have access to them now.
I think if the president has sent the bill, this ITR bill into bill, I'm happy as a growing journalist. At least I'll get certain information from authorities.
I think it's 9 years now. It came into Parliament in 2010, so it's been passed now. I think to yield a lot because it makes us have access to all public accounts and hold all public officials accountable for every money, any scandal or any hitch that goes on every public institution.
The right to information bill, which has been passed on yesterday, I think it's a great privilege to read the upcoming journalists and even the journalists on the field, because we getting information sometimes becomes difficult. They prevent us, let me put it that way, from getting access to them. And now this bill is in, I think journalists will sing hallelujah.
So those are your thoughts on the RTI. Let's quickly go on Facebook and find out what people are saying. I'm starting with Asamoah Kweku, who says the necessary fearful RTI bill, which the NDC was not able to pass into law in their entire 8 years, is finally passed into law. The change we voted for. Thumbs up to Akufo-Addo government. And then Moses Mpom says, now I am walking to my municipal assembly to ask them how much was spent last year and my place road. Okay, your road is still dusty. Inusa says, this is what we voted for. Thank you, NPP, and the #1 President Akufo-Addo, President do all. God bless you. William Kwejo Minta says, is this not our Ghana? Nothing will change. Why? Well, you are quite pessimistic. I mean, hopefully it's healthy pessimism. But there are lots of you who are saying that you're excited about this. You want to test the law, really. That's what those who have experienced it are advising us to do. They say until you file a request, until you test it, you will not understand. You will not know the efficiency. You will not know its effectiveness. So you want to try it. Let's keep filing those requests now. And we're hopeful that the president will assent to this. And it will certainly be law. This is still The Pulse with me, Gifty, and Apia. Excited day for a lot of the people who advocated for the right to information law. Do stay with me. I'll come back. When I return, I'll be taking you to the University of Energy and Natural Resources, where we understand that a final year student there is blackmailing some female students with nude pictures of them. We'll be hearing the story, and then we'll be talking to the university authorities as well. Do stay.